only 77% of our population is connected. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So those of us farm girls and farm boys here remember in the 30s and 40s the REA, the Rural Electrification Association, pushed the electrical infrastructure out through subsidy or public partnerships, perhaps. Is there something like that? I remember reading about some effort like that to get broadband out to all the schools and all the homes. And I don't know if probably DHS probably has no hand.
So DHS does not have a hand in that, and it would be imprudent of me to comment on a program from another federal department as a part of it, except to say that the more connected we are as a nation, and the more focus we have on building science and technology innovation, I think the better off we are as a community. One of the things that we are very focused on in DHS is not only building the capabilities that allow us to protect and defend the environment that exists today, but building that cadre of cyber professionals that's important not just to us in the federal government, but important to us as a nation. So we aren't just focused on ensuring that there are a number of individuals that we can hire into DHS or into the House HHS or into Social Security, but ensuring that we actually have a cadre of professionals who understand the importance of technology, of information technology, and of other technologies, not just to us today, but to us over the next several decades in terms of our ability to be an innovative nation that continues to stay at the forefront of driving the economic engine, not just of our corner of the world, but of the world writ large. Let me make sure I heard your question. The question was, are there any plans to release Einstein, not just to the federal government, but to other individuals? So at the moment, our plans for Einstein 2 and Einstein 3 are for deployment across the federal departments and agencies. Any future plans require a fairly significant analysis from legal policy and operational analysis, and that activity is in the very nascent stages, in that analytic stage. So there aren't any decisions at this point about releasing it further. Other questions?
What kind of preparation is being done for a worst-case scenario? Say the power grid goes out, there is no connectivity. Is there a collection of data or information or content that you, through your department, would want to empower the public with?
So your question's a really great one, coming off of Cyberstorm 3, which was a national level exercise that we run every other year at this point. Obviously, it's the third one, so we've had two previously. This exercise had partners across the international community, across industry, and across the federal government as a whole, and the scenario was very similar to one that you discussed. It wasn't exactly what you discussed. And let us test that national level incident response plan, the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, and the National Incident Management Plan, which are the national level plans that are established to ensure that we have ready-made, in as much as possible, sets of activities that we understand how to execute and aren't in a crisis executing for the first time. We learned a great deal from that about information sharing, what was working and what might be needed tweaked. It was wonderful to see this plethora of individuals who really came to the table honestly and tried to work through these very complicated scenarios. As I said, we had more international partners than we've ever had before, more industry partners than we had ever had before in this particular environment, and that really helped us refine it. Coming out of that, the National Cybersecurity Incident Response Plan, which is was provisionally approved going in, the point of the exercise was really to test this and to see what changes might possibly need to be made, as well as to test alert levels and response levels. So you're very familiar with the Homeland Security alert levels, a similar structure for cybersecurity alert levels, so that we can educate the American public about what it means and what actions may need to be taken under those sets of circumstances.
Plans to have this readily available content? Is there a group of listing, or is there content that if we need to know information, has that been structured, put together, or collected?
Right. So we have relationships to the states and to some local governments, county and local governments through the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We have an outreach program to the states where that content is passed to the fusion centers and then further distributed within that structure from the state fusion centers. We've undergone an effort to clear security officers in all 50 states as well so that they have access to information at higher clearance levels than that which they would have if they were not cleared professionals as a part of it. And so that's been an important effort we've undergone over the last year.
And one more question, how is that being disseminated? Once it goes to the jurisdiction, once it goes to the municipality, how is it being disseminated?
So that's a really great question, but it's not one where there's a single answer. And so it's really complicated to be able to answer it. It really varies by location, and it would be prudent for you to ask that question inside your own community and then work with your state fusion center in order to get that. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
So the precepts on wireless networks that we're moving across the country, how does the debate around net neutrality and the maintaining the neutrality on the networks affect us using those networks and using that infrastructure?
So one of the things that's going on right now that I'm sure you're very aware of is the Hill's efforts in trying to define cyber legislation, and net neutrality is obviously a part of any cyber legislation efforts that are going on. And so it'll be really interesting over the next year for us to see how that legislation plays out. And once we have that guidance from the legislative branch, from the executive branch, we'll be able to figure out how that would affect both our procedures and our partnership activities as we go forward. It's really premature to comment without that. Yeah.
Quickly, you mentioned the trusted information. Do you have any update on the rate of acceptance of the reduction of the gateways and the implementation of the
So acceptance is an interesting question. There's been no question about the need to roll out trusted internet connection activities across the federal government. That's not been an issue from any federal department or agency at this point. What we've been working our way through with each of the departments and agencies is what's the timeline that they would have to go through. There are currently 51 standards that have to be complied with in the trusted internet connection point, Einstein 2 being only one of that 51. And it's unrealistic to expect that someone could implement these overnight. And so we've been working with each of the departments and agencies in order to establish the dates by which they would be able to comply with all 51 of those efforts, while we're simultaneously working with them to determine what the next set of standards might be, right? It's also unrealistic to expect that everything's going to stay constant as we go forward. And so we have a review process that says these 51 were sufficient last year. This year it's some number, some set, either some of those aren't exactly correct, they need to be changed slightly, or here's the next set as they go forward. And adoption has varied. We have some departments and agencies who are already completed with their adoption of all of those standards and their reduction of connection points, and others who have a much more complicated environment that it's taking them a little bit longer to be complete as they go forward. It's the federal government, so if we're talking departments and agencies specifically, is not a single thing. So USAID is a worldwide organization. The Department of Interior has internet connection at every state park. And so it's a very different model for those two federal departments and agencies, and we have to work with them specifically on how they can be successful in satisfying their citizen mission and in complying with the standards that are a part of it.